Hey, welcome back, everybody, to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts. Don't call me Shirley. My name is Caliban, and your other host is right here.
Hey, trying to think of a Naked Gun quote or something.
There's a part where he is, I think it's the beginning of the first one, he's broken up with his girlfriend or his wife or whatever, and he's driving home from the airport after having foiled a meeting between Saddam Hussein and Pol Pot and Gaddafi or whatever. And he's talking about, he's just, it's so tough without, everything I see reminds me of her. And then he sees like this pair of like industrial cooling towers, that are vaguely breast shaped. They're sort of round.
Yeah.
That's an actual plant that's on like the PCH. And when my family, we took a trip to LA, to California, I remember seeing those towers, and I had to get my camera out and take a picture of those towers.
Were you going to admit to them that you knew where that was from?
I tried to give the delivery. I tried to explain. I don't think they'd seen the film, but I think they got the general gist.
They're like, yeah, it's a universal joke there.
Much of my life is trying to explain really funny jokes to people and them not really getting the full force of it.
It's funny, I swear. You just have to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't think of any like lines. It was what you said. I thought of like the first thing that came to mind was like the scene where like O.J. Simpson just gets completely fucked up in the beginning, which is like probably the best gag in the thing because it's so relentless.
Yeah. And the original series is really great too. How can we connect that to Star Trek? We can do it somehow.
Oh,
this is our best chance, probably.
If only.
I don't think OJ was ever on an episode of Star Trek, thank God.
Thankfully.
But anyway, this extremely professional podcast has now come to order. We are here to talk about the episodes of Star Trek that were inspired by other pieces of media, and we are glad to be at our new home on the Just Enough Trope network. You can find more Just Enough Trope shows by checking out justenoughtrope.com and Just Enough Trope on Twitter. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've been yawning all day. Was kind of dragging, but I drank an energy drink, and now I'm just like bouncing off the wall a little bit.
Sure. I just got one of those. I have a smartwatch now, and I've got one of those like sleep tracking apps. It kind of beeps at you when it's like time to go to sleep, so it kind of gets you into bed.
Oh, wow.
And then while you're in bed, while you're sleeping, it can move, or it senses when you move around, and this is kind of a little creepy, but it's got like, it can sense you snoring or like making weird noises too. And then it puts all that into a spreadsheet that I haven't looked at because I'm terrified to know what a bad sleeper I am.
Oh, yeah. Like you slept 4 hours out of the 8 hours.
It's like having a scale, and never stepping on that scale. And every time you walk into the bathroom, that scale is hanging over everything. So one of these days I'll have to actually look at how much I'm sleeping, but hopefully it is enough. I don't feel like it is. This is like the doldrums of summer. It's like a place where a lot of the major cons have gone by in terms of like nerd news or action, especially Star Trek. Las Vegas was last weekend. And so this is the part where everything should cool down and we can all take a rest, but there's no rest. There's never any rest for the weary or for the weary podcaster. Things are always going on.
Yeah, it's and not now where Trek has gone full Marvel too. Like soon we're about to be inundated with Star Trek, and there we'll never not be talking about Star Trek.
Well, to be full Marvel, you'd need some movies, so hopefully somebody will get on top of that.
Please, yeah. That would be awesome. I'd love to go back.
Well, we need to, yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it is just this division between CBS and Viacom, and however Paramount and whatever fits in there. And so they're ready to go. They're roaring on the TV side, but they can't figure out this movie side, and I wish they could.
Yeah, should they just let them like be their own thing? Like, hey, just make whatever.
Because they were going to be Marvel, they'd have to do the integration though. So you've got the bigger things that are being explored. This way you are fighting Khan's minions or people allied with Khan on the TV show, and then we all team up a couple different ships and take down Khan or whoever in a film. Which, now that I say, sounds terrible, but
Yeah, or they'll, I'm thinking of like on Marvel, it's like you have the Netflix shows, which turned out not to be canon or something, it seems like.
Yeah.
Or then you have like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which it's like, yeah, there's like a guy named like Thanos who's doing something, but like we gotta like go fight this other guy like simultaneously that like they just won't talk about in the Avengers movies.
Right. You fight Thanos face to face. We'll go through his tax records and see if we can get him that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. They'll pull the full Al Capone on him. That's how we really need to get Thanos.
Yeah, snap that. Snap those tax documents. Speaking of like nerdy movies, I did something recently that was a first-time experience for me.
Okay.
And I'll quickly get to it so you can't speculate. I watched Super Mario Brothers, the movie, for the first time.
Oh,
solely
awesome.
so I could fully appreciate your virtual theater episode on said movie. And I had never seen it before.
Wow.
And I think that of all the movies I've ever seen, it is the movie that I said "what" during the most time.
Okay, yeah.
Every 5 minutes, something else would happen, and I'd go, "What?
And
What?"
that's like probably starting off too. It like starts on a what, right?
Yeah, and then it never lets up.
Did you enjoy yourself despite saying what so much, or?
It has a really talented cast
Totally.
for the garbage that it kind of is. And I think that, except for maybe a few kind of weird things at the end, I was mostly satisfied with it as a mid-'80s, we don't know, Marvel is years away, nobody knows how to make one of these things work.
Yeah.
I think they could have half-assed it, if you watch like the old Lou Albano, Super Mario cartoon show. There's like nothing happening. There's nothing happening there. Yeah, but
Yeah.
they definitely tried something, and it worked for me all the way up to the end with the sequel bait hook. Like I thought that was unnecessary, but otherwise,
Oh yeah.
because that was the one thing to me that was like, hey, the kind of commercial thing. Everything else, why is Dennis Hopper there? Why is he doing this long runner about him getting his pizza? Why is the guy who God, what's his name? I can't. Fisher Stevens in this thing. All these things are like they're dancing in the elevator. Like all of these things are weird choices. But yeah, that one last thing where it's like, here we go again. It's like, okay, I don't think this is ever going to happen though.
No, apparently that did not happen. It turns out. To me, I kind of like all of the like weird what questions because the answer is just because for most of it, for example, we talk about it on the podcast, but there's like, well, like why did they make all the Goombas dance in the elevator, or like how did they know that would work? And Luigi says, well, everybody likes dancing.
Everybody loves dancing.
Yeah,
Right.
And I feel like that you could say that answer to anything in the movie. Like how did this happen? It's like, well, just 'cause.
Yeah, it was just very strange, and that the one guy, I can't remember his name now, the musician that plays Toad, who did
I'm blanking now.
Stuff in Martha's Muffin. What's his name?
Mojo Nixon.
Mojo Nixon. There you go.
That's it. I don't know why I blanked on that.
Why the hell is he in this? And
not only that, but he's basically himself. You know what I mean?
Like, he plays himself until he gets his head turned into a little lizard head, but complete with microphone apparatus.
Yeah,
or harmonica.
Well, I'm glad you still enjoyed it because we were worried. Like Andy rewatched it to prepare. He likes to write the little run through, and he watched it with his fiance, and he was like,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he was like, this is not as fun, and she definitely didn't enjoy it, and it was much better when we watched it with, a group of like 15 people, and everyone was like cheering along, and it was like an incredible experience, honestly.
It's a thing that if you did it, live action's always a problem because how do you explain? Although if you watch something like, I don't know, first thing that comes to my head, like that Icelandic show Lazy Town.
Yes,
You ever seen that?
Yeah, I've seen
it's like
some skits.
This weird combination. It's sort of like a live action cartoon. If you did something like that, I could see, but it's always hard to translate it into live action. Cartoon, no problem. In fact, I'm amazed that there isn't just some series of Super Mario direct-to-video movies where he's just fighting and playing tennis or something like that. Maybe there is, I don't know. But I think that with a lot of these properties that clearly have money and name recognition that they try to turn into film properties, you could play it totally straight. I think you'd be fine, but they never do. They always, I don't know if it's like cynical movie executives or writers and screenwriters that are out of ideas, but it seems like they're embarrassed of their property.
Yep.
So you get something like Dora the Explorer, where the whole thing is basically just like a fart joke movie, but it's wrapped in a Dora shell, or something like Sonic the Hedgehog. Why can't he just like liberate like the Green Hill Zone or whatever? Why does it have to have James Marsden in it, and it's in the real world, and he's got portals or something like that?
Yeah, that was something
it's like they're
I
embarrassed
noticed
of
in
their
like
premise.
in Doom. We did Doom, and it was like it felt like the premise of Doom is very simple, but it felt like they were like, oh, we got to make this like seem like something you would see in a movie, and it's like, why can't it just be like kill all the hell demons that are coming out of the portal or something? You know, why is it got to be so complicated? Add all this lore.
Mars is a hell planet, so yeah, how do we solve that? But instead, it's got to be really self-aware about its video game roots.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think they're gonna they're getting there now. I think where they're not as embarrassed, but there's still that lingering taste in everyone's mouth, I guess.
Well, hopefully. I mean, sci-fi is not a bad word anymore if you consider like Marvel films to be fantasy and sci-fi, which they totally are.
Totally.
They are the biggest films there is.
Yeah.
And I haven't even brought up Avatar yet.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think everything now is going to be like, how do we make it like a Marvel movie? So,
yeah.
I mean,
we'll have to suffer through that for the next 20 years.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely going to suck a lot, but it's also going to give us at least some good movies, I think.
It was great to get to this point, though.
Yeah, it was a fun ride.
I haven't watched, I've watched Avengers Endgame a total of once, and I really want to watch it again. There's two problems. One, carving out, 3 hours of my life.
Yeah.
Two, just, I don't know, like it was so, it continually amazes me that they landed it. I mean, there's things you could complain about in it, and it's not perfect, but when you look at other series and trilogies and trying to bring something home, the way that they hit all the notes and just delivered pretty much exactly what we were all looking for blows me away.
Yeah, it was like satisfying. Like you don't hear, there was no like fan outrage either.
Right, yeah. Except in the usual corners over why ScarJo and not Jeremy Renner, or Hulk, should have been meaner or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
What's up with Cap and he's being old? How does that work? And
I have seen like random complaints of like, oh, they nerfed Hulk. Like, why are you worried about Hulk's power level?
But those are all germane to the world of the film. It isn't like Matrix Revolutions where it's like, why did any of this happen? How could God let like this happen?
Well, yeah. So
not a great ending.
Yeah, it's amazing they pulled that off. I've definitely cooled on it a little bit just as a movie, but as like a like weird live event that I went to, it's still like one of my most favorite experiences, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of giant sci-fi movies and events and things that influence things or their entire genre for years to come, we're talking about a movie today that did all of those things. It's a movie from 1956. It's called Forbidden Planet.
Imagine yourself as one of the crew of this faster-than-light spaceship of the future, sharing their curiosity to know the unknown, their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventures.
Sir, we're being radar scanned. United Planets Cruiser C-57D, J.J. Adams commanding. Who are you?
Morbius of the Bellerophon.
Oh, Dr. Morbius, my orders are to survey the situation on Altair IV.
Commander, if you set down on this planet, I warn you that I cannot be answerable for the safety of your ship or your crew.
When you reach the Forbidden Planet, you will meet Dr. Morbius, played by Walter Pidgeon. The Doctor is sole owner of this fabulous world. Anne Francis is his alluring daughter, Alta, who has never seen a young man till she meets Commander Adams, played by talented Leslie Nielsen.
Come on in.
Didn't bring my bathing suit.
What's a bathing suit?
Oh, murder.
You will meet a charming character in The Robot, able to produce, on order, 10 tons of lead or a slinky evening gown. always at your service.
You must be the loveliest, softest thing you've ever made for me. And fit in all the right places. With lots and lots of star sapphires.
Star sapphires take a week to crystallize properly. Would diamond or emeralds do?
I have to admit, and I'm ashamed to admit, I don't remember whether I've seen Forbidden Planet or not. I'm sure that at some point in the past I have, but it isn't something that's like in my rotation that I can quickly call to mind.
Yeah, when we were like talking about it, I was like, yeah, Forbidden Planet, yeah, totally. It's a classic. And when I was like going to get it, I was like, yeah, totally. Forbidden Planet. But then I couldn't like remember what it was called when I was looking for it. I was like, oh, I've definitely not seen this movie before.
It is of course, classic starring Walter Pidgeon and Francis and Leslie Nielsen, everybody.
Yeah.
How far did you get into the movie before it clicked for you that this is Leslie Nielsen?
Well, so I was aware of it going in, but then
Right.
I'm watching it and I'm staring like and squinting and like that's Leslie Nielsen. I'm watching it with Kayla, and Kayla's like right away was like, yeah, that's Leslie Nielsen.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't think so. I think he's coming later.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is a big problem in this film, is that all white guys look the same to me. And so you've just got a bunch of guys in gray uniforms with little hats. And it's like, all right, which Vitalis soaked guy is this?
Yeah.
again?
Similar to The Enemy Below also.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, these are all just like guys in the same outfit, you know?
Yeah, for me it was because I kind of turned my brain off and I just forgot about the Leslie Nielsen aspect, and it wasn't until the last reel, like I don't know, the last or second to last scene that he did something. He made some facial expression, and I was like, "Oh, that's right, Leslie Nielsen's in this."
No, it like resembled an airplane look or something.
Yeah, an airplane look. Yeah,
I've seen him give that smirk before.
Well, to give a short synopsis of the film, essentially a starship, what's the name of the starship? The C-57D is cruising through the space lanes. It takes place in the 23rd century, and they're on their way to planet Altair IV to check up on a ship that landed there before called the Bellerophon. And when they land, they find no signs of life except for an old doctor named Dr. Morbius and his daughter. And it's weird that they're living here alone. Nobody can really figure out what's going on. And then as they get to know more about the situation of Dr. Morbius and his daughter and what's happening on the planet, strange things begin to ensue. And very much like The Enemy Below and some of the naval things we've talked about before, it's got that kind of feel to it. It's got sort of a military naval ship kind of movie feel to it.
Oh, sure, yeah. It gave me a lot of similar vibes, I guess, even though they were, out, like, they've got all these, like, weird, like, the navigation device for the ship looked all crazy and stuff, but I still felt like, yeah, this is not a far cry from The Enemy Below.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the specific episode that we think that it influenced later, but you can definitely see the seeds of what Star Trek would be just a decade later in this Space Federation. We're kowtowing to rank and privilege, and we're giving orders, and you've got guys, go off and do this, and we've got check the sensors and scan for this. It's you felt a lot of the visual language of Star Trek in this.
Yeah, I was actually, we were talking about Enemy Below and how it was kind of just like, for Balance of Terror, they just like almost copy and pasted the movie. I was surprised they're like, there's definitely a lot of original series episodes you can point to, but I was like, you could just change the characters to be Captain Kirk and McCoy and all that, and like this could be an episode of Star Trek. It felt like,
yeah, for the most part.
I was like, this is one of the most Star Trek, non-Star Trek things I've watched, I guess.
And the plot itself, I guess we don't have to worry about spoilers. The idea of this ancient progenitor race that came up with all this amazing technology, but then themselves were destroyed and consumed by it, I think is a plot that we've seen more than once on Star Trek.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of stuff in this, maybe it feels like stuff that now you've just seen it, the seeds have been just, grown elsewhere, all over sci-fi and other types of stories, really. But like,
Yeah.
And it seems like, wow, this is maybe at this point, if a movie did this, you'd be like, okay, I've seen this before, but I'm, at the time, I'm sure this was like, hey, this is all like totally new stuff for the most part.
Yeah, something that gets left out of Trek, I think, often, and I'm not sure if this is its roots in like the '60s and American exceptionalism, is you never get a sense of the history of the galaxy before the advent of the Federation. It's almost like, yeah, there was Romulans and Klingons and Vulcans, but then the humans showed up, and look out. Archer's going to punch his way into us having a Federation, and that's when the history of the galaxy starts. And of course, that's not true. You get nods to ancient civilizations like the Takan Empire or the Iconians in Star Trek, but if this is a really like a multicultural franchise, it should feel like we are joining, an ongoing history of the galaxy. Do you know what I mean? Like there should be, in something like in sci-fi like Mass Effect or Contact, there are these sort of hyperspace lanes, these sort of wormholes that are there, everybody uses because they're convenient, but nobody knows where they come from. Like they were created hundreds of thousands of years ago by some other race who died out because, everything is fleeting and mortal. And so I like the idea that they're like the Krell, whoever and whatever they were, had all this stuff figured out. Then it turns out that they were, of course, destroyed by Freudian psychology, I guess.
I mean, who would have known that
Yes.
that would have come back to bite them?
If only they'd had a psychology textbook. That's something that really got to me about this film, which is it's almost like anti-Star Trek in my mind. Like Star Trek, maybe I'm thinking Gene Roddenberry, who was already working on like The Lieutenant at this point, but he must have seen Forbidden Planet and had ideas or been influenced. I feel like Star Trek was almost set up in opposition to Forbidden Planet, because Forbidden Planet has similar trappings. It's a space federation with military flavoring, but there's a lot of references to like to God and like religion and like the whole movie has like you don't go too far, don't look for too much knowledge. Ultimately we're all pawns of forces larger than we can control. And I don't think that would ever be the message in Star Trek. The message would always be in Star Trek that discovery is important. It's really the most important thing in what we're doing here. Whereas in Forbidden Planet, it's all about forbidden knowledge.
Yeah, that thought had crossed my mind while watching it, but I also had kind of considered, like, I mean, maybe the idea, well, it doesn't speak to the Krell necessarily, but just for the Doctor or whatever, like, maybe the idea of boosting your IQ, like, artificially isn't the best idea. It reminds me of, like, when they're like, hey, Riker, you want to join the Q continuum? And it's like,
right.
Maybe it's not a good idea to just, like, fill him with all that power from where he is,
Yeah, I guess those themes do exist in Star Trek still. Or like when Barclay gets his IQ boost and suddenly, he knows better than everybody else and he's going to take over the ship.
I did lose my mind every time they said something like IQ boost or something like that. I was like, yes, it's amazing.
The one guy's like, well, I got an IQ of 160. I can't figure this out at all. All right, calm down.
There was something that I did like about like you can advance yourself so far, but there's like maybe like this darker side, the id or whatever, that you can't suppress. And I guess the way the Doctor stops it all in the end, I mean, he dies, but like it's by like confronting that part of himself.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay.
But hell yes, it's like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy. Yes. I declare bankruptcy. It isn't that he has to like, my mother spanked me till I was 14. Like there isn't anything that he has to really like get through. There's no breakthrough. He just goes like, I denounce you. And then we're good.
Yeah. Well, I would be lying though if I said I did not like totally love that scene.
It's a pretty good scene.
I was like, yeah, denounce the id.
That scene, every scene really in particular is full of these amazing, both practical and like, special effects.
Yes.
When you watch a movie from the 50s that's sci-fi, you expect to see some rubber costumes and some things on strings, some Ed Wood type stuff maybe. But these are like extremely high quality effects that continually just had me with my jaw on the floor about what they could accomplish at that time.
I was totally expecting like, okay, I've heard this is, kind of push some things forward with special effects, but I expected, it's going to be dated, but I'll still like it. But I found myself like my mind blown by a lot of what I saw. And I guess I didn't expect that out of a movie from the 1950s.
Yeah, just like the animated sequences when they're flying in space and there's, they fly sort of behind this planet, there's an eclipse, was really neat. The huge stage that they built that took up like an entire soundstage to shoot like the planet sequences with the ship and everything. It's clear that they put a lot of, 1950s money into this. And apparently they got a guy named Joshua Mador, who was an animator for Disney, who worked on the special effects for 2000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was also an animator on many Disney films like Dumbo, Bambi, and so on and so forth. Like he was instrumental in getting a lot of these sequences put together, especially these sequences with the id monster.
Oh my God.
Near the end. Which were not traditional cell animation. They used like a different sort of photographic process, but the whole thing of it going through the electrical field and then us being able to see like its outline, like that was all great.
That was like I was impressed. I was frightened. It totally did have like this feel of like that extra touch that you see in like old Disney animation. Like I didn't even think about that. Like there was something that was like, next level about it. That
if
was
the id
totally
monster
shocking.
showed up on Bald Mountain, he wouldn't be too out of place.
He'd be welcome
by all the demons. Of course, the centerpiece of special effects in this movie would have to be Robbie the Robot, who was built for $125,000 in 1950s dollars. Yeah, it was 7% of the 1.9 million budget, and it'd be about $1 million, I think, in modern dollars. And yeah, it was amazing. Like it's so much different than the kind of like beep boop robots that you get, even in a year before movies, in 1956. Like it was just sort of another level of what you'd expect from an actor, portraying a robot. So of course, save money, right? So Robbie the Robot would show up in a lot of MGM productions after this. You would see him in other movies. He showed up in like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Like
Wow.
That's a prop that hung around in Hollywood for a long time.
You got to get your money's worth for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh no, they spent a lot, but they probably got all that money back for sure.
Yeah, the DVD that I checked out from the library had like a bonus DVD, I think, with another movie that he's in it. I didn't watch it, but I was like, okay, wow, they're really like, yeah, Robbie, we spent money on this, okay? He was one of those things actually where he had that, like, it was so impressive, like looking at him still, where, and like when he was talking, I was like, wow, that looks awesome. But then he also just had like a lot of moments where it was funny to like laugh at. It's like probably a guy in a suit, right? Like walking around. When he's just like walking around, or when they get on the cart and he's moving around, it looks so funny.
Yeah.
But it still looks cool, but it's like, that looks, dated in a fun way.
I like the kind of runner that they had with him and the cook.
Yeah.
Where the cook's like trying to get him to make bourbon. And it's sort of like prefigures replicators in a way, because it's like, let me have a little sip of that. Oh, also, do you think Bender maybe came from this? Bender from Futurama?
Yeah, totally. Like,
because he
massive
drinks
Bender.
Yeah, he drinks the bourbon, and then I swear to God, they put a little belch sound effect in, and then he's like, okay, yeah, I can make this 60 gallons. Okay,
Makes like a giant stack of them. Yeah. That was a great bit that I'm glad they like kept going with that.
So it's 1956. They've got this movie. It's about a bunch of soldiers, essentially, space sailors who go to a planet. They emphasize the fact that they have been on this journey for a while, at least a year. This star is kind of far out from Earth. And they're all feeling, the effects of long military service. They're cooped up, they're tired, and they're horny. And they come to a planet where the beautiful Anne Francis is wearing miniskirts in 1956, no less. And so you get the sort of reaction from the crew that you would expect.
Yeah, this is this is easily the worst part about the movie.
It's funny, and we'll get into this when we talk about the Star Trek episode later, but she has Altair, the character or the daughter of Dr. Morbius. She has incredible agency for a woman in a 1956 sci-fi movie.
Sure, yeah. I even had seen it was like banned in certain countries or something.
Oh, interesting. She's never portrayed as being dopey or stupid. It's clearly that she's educated. She has not. This is just like this film's inspiration, which we're also going to talk about, The Tempest. This is the first that she's seen of men, so she doesn't know their world. And of course, in a 1950s way, they take advantage of that. But she always seems to be, until the end of the movie and the climax, a present and a part of the scenes that are happening.
Yeah.
It gets a little weird when there's a character, it's like Jerry, I think, old dependable Jerry is trying to hit on her, and he's teaching her how to kiss, right?
Yeah, that's actually one of those, like, I'm sure it didn't come from this movie, but one of those, like, trope things I feel like you see pop
teaching
up everywhere.
Alien women to love. Yeah,
like the naive, not like you said, she's not like dopey or stupid, but the sort of like, oh, I've never known a man, and like, just some like random asshole.
And it subverts it because he's playing that trope, but she's just uneducated. She's not naive, and so he kisses her, and she's like, "Huh, is that it?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I mean, you have to do it a couple times. This has never happened before." And then they do it a couple times, and then she's kind of like, "Yeah, okay, this is pretty good. This is pretty good." You don't ever feel like she's being taken advantage of. She's just like sampling this, and she's like "Yeah, okay, this is all right.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Do we hug or something too? Okay, let's hug. Yeah, that seems okay."
I feel like, she's talking to her dad later, and she's like, I mean, he was just telling me about hugging and kissing.
Right.
That's a great line.
Which you never did, Dad. I'm 28 now. Yeah. And then, of course, as that scene is going on, the captain comes up, Captain Leslie Nielsen, and we get a really weird scene where he slut-shames her.
Yeah.
And is basically like, before this, we've had, this guy has come up to her when they first meet her, and he said, "Watch out for the captain. He'll rape you," basically, in like subtext. And then we get these two alone finally, and he's like, "Put some pants on. What's wrong with you?" And there's a lot of like, it seems like the movie is suggesting that there is like subconscious things going on this guy needs to get out. Like this guy would be the villain in the last reel of any other film. But of course they just become romantic leads in the last third of this film.
Yeah, it's classic. He negs her, and then they're just together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of, it almost, Leslie Nielsen, of all people, I feel like is kind of the most non-important character in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's exemplary of it, I think. He like only exists to like make her fall in love with someone to like tick the dad off, basically.
And to knock her down, basically. Like, she designed this outfit herself, and her dad's okay with it. It's totally acceptable. But then Leslie Nielsen comes in, and he's like, "You deserve what happens to you wearing something like that." And it's just some weird language that has...
Yeah, it was like, they're fine here on this planet before... not really, but I mean...
Yeah, we didn't need you to come and tell us what to do.
Yeah, and there was no, like, at least we'll talk about it, I'm sure, with Enterprise, but like there didn't feel like much of an effort to like make them have like a romantic connection. They had a scene later where they were maybe a bit more where he just like sees her naked, and then it's like now they're a thing, I guess. But...
After because she does for him, she designs a dress that is more covering, and she's asking the robot to help her produce it. And she's designing, like she says, I can't see, you shouldn't be able to see anywhere below, above, or through. And the robot asks if it should be radiation proof, and she's like, "No, eye proof will do." Which is like, okay, that's pretty good. That's
Yeah,
pretty
some good intentional Robbie gags too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
When he's like carrying around the heavy stuff, and they're like, "Oh, he's strong."
Yeah. So these men come in, and it's just this weird conflict of themes because there's clearly like a kind of Edenic sort of nature to this. Like, man is coming in and wrecking this. The captain sort of embracing Altair in the little garden area they have, and then the tiger, which up to this point has been completely gentle with her, now is suddenly wants to attack. Is sort of like, it seems like a metaphor for like a loss of innocence or celibacy or whatever. And of course he shoots it with his surprisingly like non-impactful gun. Like maybe this is how guns would be if they shot radiation, but all their guns do this little pew pew kind of Atari kind of shot. It's not very forceful, but yeah, of course he disintegrates the tiger, and she's like, "Oh no, I didn't think that would happen."
Yeah, that was like the way they played that scene was super weird. I felt like, and he was just like, "Yeah, I mean that just happened." Like I didn't get what I was supposed to feel
You're a
by
woman
that.
now, baby.
It wasn't until like maybe the next scene where I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it." Like, things are different now. But I was like, I didn't understand the purpose of what I was seeing at the time, and I didn't feel anything by it either, other than I think I said, "What?"
Yeah. See, it's not just Super Mario. Some other movies do that too. What? Something I also really liked was the sort of the model and miniature work and the sort of compositing. There's that part where he takes him. They basically break into his office, and another good line. He comes out of his secret door and he's like, "Yeah, the silverware is like in the kitchen if you want to rob me." But then he takes them and shows them all the wonders of the Krell facility, and they're going through all these areas that have this like huge scale, and they're walking on walkways, and there's giant pits below. And I think that had to have influenced the people that designed Star Wars, like the idea of the Death Star or these huge buildings in Star Wars that have like this tiny little railing, and then there's like some yawning chasm that must have some industrial application, but it just looks really cool. It's like it's architecture as landscape, basically.
Yeah, and it does like, well, in addition to that, while they're like going through there's like, maybe this is the whole movie, but there's like the most disturbing soundtrack going on, like the score. And it's just this total like mood piece for a while of seeing these like giant landscapes and like creepy computer noises happening. It's you can see the influence probably in like all sci-fi. It's like that.
This movie, as we've said, is influenced, I think, or at least based generally on the Tempest by Shakespeare. And it doesn't, it's only very nominally based in that way. Of course, The Tempest, if anybody doesn't know, is a play about a duke, the Duke of Milan, who is usurped, and he and his daughter are banished to this sort of desert isle. And while there, he learns the ways of magic and spirits. And so he can control the weather, he can control spirits. And he's raising his daughter, he's raising her apart from any court or society, so she is sort of innocent. Her name is Miranda, and his name is Prospero, and he causes the ship of his usurper Antonio to crash upon his shores, intending to do vicious bodily harm and get his revenge, but then is later convinced to sort of let everybody go. There's a man named Ferdinand who is the male ingenue who falls in love with Miranda and sort of teaches her the ways of love. And everybody has a good time and a party at the end. And so we get parts of that. And in some of the other properties that we'll talk about that also seem to be influenced by the Tempest, they always kind of leave that out. They always want to have guy on a planet. He's got a daughter who is definitely going to fall in love with one of the crew members. And he's got some kind of power that he shouldn't have or that's ultimately destructive. But they always leave out like the good parts of the story. Yeah,
I wonder why. Do you think why is that? Is it just more? Do they think it's more titillating to go the other way?
Possibly because The Tempest has some great scenes and some great lines in it, but it isn't like it's not a great plot. Do you know what I mean? Like there
Right.
isn't. It's kind of anticlimactic when you've got a godlike sorcerer and a bunch of dudes who are just literally survived a shipwreck. There is no real threat to anybody. Like the biggest threat may come from the sort of side comedy characters. There are two characters called Trinculo and Stefano, who are these real like they're just mess. They're messes. They're walking garbage bags. Drunks who
Oh, they're gonna kill him, right?
yeah, they basically meet up with Caliban. Hey, there you go.
Hey.
A spirit. Well, we did Gooey a couple weeks ago.
Fair enough.
A spirit who hates Prospero, and so it seems like they've got this plot where they're going to kill Prospero, but it's just Looney Tunes. It never really goes anywhere.
Yeah, but it's more like then they see some magic shit and they're like, whoa.
Whoa, forget this. Yeah. And so you get those elements in movies like this. In this, we've got Morbius, who's, clearly the Prospero character. And it's an interesting twist that he can't control all these wonders that he has accessed. In fact, the spirit, if you will, in this film, the id monster, would be his sort of Caliban, and it wants to destroy these other people and ultimately will destroy him.
Yeah, I guess it's it's almost the like inverse where it's like Tempest is like guy sets off with like the revenge plan. He's like intent on doing harm, and then by the end, for the sake of his daughter, is kind of like, I'll be good, or like I don't really know because I didn't actually read it. But then with this, it's like it's almost the opposite where it's like, I'm just like trying to like hang out and learn about the Krell, and then oh no. Like he didn't want anything bad to happen.
Yeah, but but I subconsciously will defend this, and I am jealous of this knowledge that I have gained. And if you interfere with it or want to share it with anybody else, subconsciously I want to destroy you.
Yeah, I felt like that actually. I mean, I can see like the Tempest for what it is, but I kind of like that spin on it. Like I liked I guess different like themes almost came forth because they changed that aspect, and I kind of enjoyed it.
I have to wonder if there's maybe like an atomic age parable in here as well. The idea of having harnessed the power of the atom, creating nuclear reactors and atomic bombs, but it coming back on you if you're not careful. Like,
right.
What is it exactly that we have unleashed on the world?
There's like the invisible threat or whatever too of like radiation maybe.
Oh yeah, good one.
Is that the id monster maybe?
That's one thing that I really liked about this HBO Chernobyl series. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but
I haven't. No.
Oh, you should check it out. It's not great. Everybody thinks it's the best thing ever. It's not Watch More TV, but it's okay. But one thing they do really well is they really sell you on the invisible threat of radiation. There's all these areas, in the plant after this accident happens that are almost instantly fatal for humans, or at least very dangerous. And instead of like playing weird music or showing a character's POV and seeing something glow or something, they just really sell that the characters know that there is this invisible silent threat. It's just a shot of nothing. If you ever see, there's a picture of a thing called the elephant's foot in Chernobyl, which is in one part of where the reactor like blew up or whatever, the fuel, which is incredibly radioactive, melted and it started to leak out of this one spot. And the radioactivity of that spot has decreased over the years, but it's still very dangerous. And a guy sent a robot in, or maybe he took the picture himself with shielding, I don't know, but he took a picture of this thing called the elephant's foot, which is this blob of melted metal and fuel. And that is like, seeing that, it's like God. Like if you looked at it, you would die. Like if you are close enough to see this thing, you're already dead because of the millions of Röntgens of radiation that would be streaming through you.
Wow.
Like I think Chernobyl did a really good job of selling that there is just danger hiding in the air that you can't even see, which is crazy. Like the fact that you just want to walk around and have a sandwich and have a picnic or whatever, but like radiation would just ruin all that for you, and there's nothing you can do. It's not a tiger that you can run away from or climb up a tree or something.
Or like shoot your little laser gun.
Shoot your little pew pew, your little ineffectual laser guns. Yeah, it would just kill you.
I guess it's also weird to just think about that as like it's like that's on Earth, you know, like
Yeah.
it's not like some other uninhabitable place, you know.
It's like
on a Class
space
M
thing.
planet.
It's on a Class M planet. They got a lot of mileage out of their guns, which is why I thought it was weird that we watched Enemy Below 57, right? And
Yeah.
there's deck guns, there's real depth charges blowing up and throwing water into the air, and they set up like this, from a sci-fi fan perspective, really cool like battery of like tracking lasers. Anything comes through this field, we're gonna fry it. And then they're like, test the weapons, and they shoot. It's like pew pew pew. It's just these little purple beams that come out. Yeah, so I don't know, a little underwhelming.
That might like desensitize people to violence too in
Yeah,
the future.
maybe they didn't want to glorify violence. I think that's probably what it was.
Oh yeah.
Would that we all could stick our heads in a IQ machine and immediately die after. I like how the doc goes in, pretty much like the second in command, like second hero in the film. And his only purpose is to go put his head in the thing, come out, go, it's, the id or the mind or whatever, and then immediately dies.
Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen's like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but like I said, both of them, Leslie Nielsen is really just like, he's like the almost like the main player character to like move you through the story. Like he's like next to almost being like a silent protagonist, and his weird sidekick is like he's just like he's a red shirt basically, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything that we needed to say about this film. I mean, it is a classic, enduring.
Yeah,
I think you can see how it's influenced future sci-fi productions to come. It's in the Library of Congress, a film registry for being significant, and probably Leslie Nielsen's best movie. Unless you want to put Dracula Dead and Loving It up there.
I've never seen that. I've never seen it. I'll go. No, that's probably the best one I've seen. I'll give it up for Forbidden Planet.
Forbidden Planet has connections to Shakespeare. So do not only the episode of Star Trek we're about to talk about, but many other episodes of Star Trek. But we'll get to that when we come back with more BackTrekking.
Your Honor, a courtroom is a crucible. In it we burn away irrelevancies until we are left with a pure product, the truth, for all time.
Oh man, this is so intense. Data's on trial for his life.
I know. This episode, The Measure of a Man, is based on the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision of 1857.
And every week on BackTrekking, we take a look at the real-world events that inspired classic Star Trek episodes. Sorry. Shut up!
Who are you?
We're the hosts of BackTrekking. I'm
You
Caliban.
will both be taken to the brig and from there to the nearest starbase, where you will answer charges for what you have done.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
This is not a game. This is life and death.
You can follow us on Twitter.
BackTrekking is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
You go f yourself.
All right, we're back, and as we're talking about the Tempest, the play by Shakespeare, and the influence that it's had on sci-fi, and Trek in particular, it's really crazy. If you look at Trek, you've got episodes like Shadow Play and DS9, even The Cage. I think The Cage has...
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, I think they've said was inspired in part by The Tempest, but I think you can definitely see similar ideas there, especially ideas similar to Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, I was kind of hinting earlier, but this Forbidden Planet feels like almost like a blueprint in a way. Even though, like you said, it's like maybe Star Trek is like a response to it. Like that's still it still feels like here's kind of all of the elements of Star Trek boiled down.
And it isn't just. I mean, there's still a beautiful, young blonde woman there for the taking. But instead of having a ancient civilization who destroyed even themselves with their power, instead in Star Trek it's just like it's no business of yours. Basically, it's like we've got this. The Telosians have this amazing power, but it doesn't have anything to do with us. And ultimately, we prove to be nothing that they can do anything with. And so they're like, well, you can just go.
That's a weird, interesting way out of it too.
Yeah. We had a plan, but it's not going to work. So
Right.
we'll see you around.
I think I texted you this, but I feel like I remember elements in like What Are Little Girls Made Of? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
The one with the androids?
It's like, I just feel like I remember an episode where Kirk's like trying to go down to a planet, and I'm sure this actually happens in like every Star Trek series, but it's like one scientist on a planet and they're like, hey, so can we come down or whatever? And the scientist is like, no, we're good. No, just leave us. We're fine. And then
There's a lot of that.
And then it's like, all right, let us come down there and see like what you're messing around with.
There's always some guy in the middle of nowhere. He's working on some stuff, and he's got either A, hot wife, or B, hot daughter. And that's the only two people that live on that planet.
Oh, yeah.
Requiem for Methuselah is a great original series episode that does that as well. There's a guy, and they managed to they go all out with this one. Not only is the Prospero character himself an immortal who has been Michelangelo, Julius Caesar, he's been all these famous people on Earth, but he's made this hot young blonde daughter who is a robot too. So they've got like all these different, it's a bukkake of like sci-fi elements in one episode.
Yeah, even more came to mind, but I don't think we just need to sit here thinking of episodes that relate.
Well, unfortunately, they might all be episodes that are better than the one that we're going to talk about to kind of ruin my review of the upcoming episode. But yes, of course, this is a pattern that's been repeated often through sci-fi, and we see it once again in the Enterprise episode, Oasis. Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
22 years ago, this ship's crew died in space.
You're not afraid it's really haunted, are you?
If we feel the spirits don't want us there, we'll leave.
Now,
there's someone here.
They're back. Alive.
You were looking where you shouldn't have.
An all-new Enterprise.
What's your history with Enterprise?
I watched it all. I've seen every episode, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen every episode of DS9?
I've seen every episode of Deep Space Nine. That's my favorite series of
Star Trek. Have you
seen
every episode of Voyager?
I have not seen every episode of Voyager.
Okay, so why Enterprise? Because it's shorter?
It was easy. So after I kind of got back into Trek, I made my way through each series, because now I'm like, now I got to know about this.
Yeah.
And I got to Voyager. I think I talked about it on a previous episode. I ended up just like, okay, what are the good episodes? Because
right.
I didn't give it. I'll be fair, I didn't give it enough chance. But then after that, I'm like, all right, here comes Enterprise. I've only heard some bad stuff about it.
Yeah.
And I think it was the combination of it was hyped up as so bad, but also it was so short that it was like, this wasn't as bad as I thought. And watching this back now, I'm like, maybe this isn't great, but it was definitely, even this episode was like, it was like watchable. I don't know if that says much about it, but it went down easy, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, maybe you're going to be our guide through this then, because this is actually the one that I've seen the least of, Enterprise. By this time, I was, as a kind of contemporary Star Trek fan, I was kind of burned out on Star Trek, and I also hit that point, in your mid-20s where it's like, okay, you're out of college, you got a job now, things are ramping up, you got a girlfriend, sci-fi goes on the back burner, and so I kind of let it go. But I've been watching it bit by bit on Netflix and trying to catch up, and I always enjoy it when I watch it. Like, I see the flaws, but I do have a lot of affection for that premise. I do think that it's a good premise, and I like all the characters for the most part, and god damn it, I like the theme song. I don't care.
I was like, I did not skip intro on Netflix, I'll tell you.
Right.
I actually sang along, so
yeah,
it's a bold choice instead of some big epic orchestration to have like a rock ballad going on.
yeah, it certainly is. I had seen more than a few episodes of Enterprise, but it only just dawned on me recently that Fred Decker was a consulting producer for basically an entire series of Enterprise. I think the first season, as we say, in the colonies. And if you don't know who that is, he is a writer and a director who directed the 1987 classic The Monster Squad. He also directed RoboCop 3 and co-wrote it along with Frank Miller. He is kind of a buddy of Shane Black, which is why, of course, the Monster Squad connection. And then he was a writer on the recent The Predator reboot, Shane Black reboot of Predator.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who has schlocky movie chops, but he hasn't. That's what I named is pretty much all he's done. And then for some reason, a year of Enterprise.
Yeah.
No clue.
I don't quite understand.
If you look at some of the personnel on Enterprise, and at this point, we could talk about this too. At this point, it seems like it's not like the inmates running the asylum. It's more like the guards and doctors have all gone crazy instead. Like when you hear about how they ran the production of Star Trek at this point, they're letting anybody come in. Like when you look at some of the people that were like writing things, some people that were pitching things, it's just chaos. And so I think sometimes they would let people in solely because they were, for instance, the director of a film like RoboCop. And so they thought like, oh, well, this guy directed RoboCop and wrote the 1991 Denzel Washington thriller Ricochet. So definitely this guy knows about Star Trek.
Oh.
So you get things like that.
Do you think that's like similar or not similar, but I don't know. There's something about that now where it's like
stunt writing or stunt casting.
Or it's just like Quentin Tarantino, make us a Star Trek movie. You know, like just we'll take whoever is down. Quentin Tarantino's a bigger deal, but you know.
At least you've picked a successful and well-lauded filmmaker. But I absolutely think that's always been a thing. We talked before about how the people that write Dora the Explorer are embarrassed that their movie is about a kid's cartoon show, and so they've got to apologize constantly for their premise.
In their own movie, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a similar thing for Star Trek, where it's like, well, we're just Star Trek, so I don't know if Queen Latifah wants to write and direct an episode, let's let her do it. No, I don't know. It could be great, but it doesn't seem like Queen Latifah's got a lot of like sci-fi chops.
Well, I don't know. It's probably a good idea to have like J.J. Abrams make a film, but it's like, you know, like how do we make this cool is basically what I think they're doing. Yeah,
that was the core of the J.J. thing, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunate, and you get this thing with like, I don't know. I'm somewhat of, I'm 50%. I'm actually divided down the middle. I'm a 50% Brandon Braga apologist and a 50% crucify him guy. Because everybody forgets about all the work that he did on like TNG and early Trek. Like he is one of the reasons that we got all the great Trek we did. But he's also somebody who stuck on for way too long, way past the point of his interest or his well of ideas being dry. And so every like episode from like midway through Voyager into the end of Enterprise, if you look for his comments about it, if he wrote it or was involved, he's like, yeah, that one wasn't that great. Or, yeah, we didn't have a good idea there. Or I kind of lost the plot halfway through. And I think I think that also applies to this episode, Oasis.
Totally. Like one like vibe I got the whole time I was watching it, or one feeling that kept coming up was this episode is, like I said, it's like very watchable. I was like, yeah, this feels like Star Trek, you know. It's got like the music and the way the scenes all fall together remind me of Star Trek. You've got like Odo is here too. Yeah. But it feels like this kind of like the generic or like the store brand Star Trek, you know what I mean? Like I got the great value Star Trek when I watched this.
Yeah, the great value. This is the black and white box. Yeah,
yeah,
and he's just burnt out, and I understand. Like he had so many roles, and he had to do so many things, and just literally start some of these shows. But that's why you groom a successor, and then you hand it off to them, and then you just cash checks as an EP. But he just always wanted to be in it. And controlling it and writing it. And I admire that, but also step away, dude.
Yeah.
Just let somebody else do it.
Yeah. It really shows when you compare it to something like maybe like Deep Space Nine or something where it's like, you can see the passion even in like the bad episodes of Deep Space Nine,
Yeah. but this is just by the numbers. And I think it's really telling that, you mentioned Odo. Yeah, Rene Auberjonois is in this episode as Ursel, the Prospero figure. And I read an anecdote that as they were shooting this episode, or maybe, I don't know, in the script stage, like he mentioned to somebody, he's like, hey, we kind of did an episode on DS9 where everybody was just holograms. And they were just like, yeah, well, what are you going to do? Like at that point, like just nobody cared that they were just repeating themselves.
Yeah, which isn't, it's not like unheard of. Like, I mean, look at our last week's episode, right? But like this feels uninspired. Like it's like they didn't even realize what they were trying to do,
They're just running through it. Yeah, one more time. Well, this episode starts as a lot of, some episodes of Enterprise start where they're eating. They always seem to be eating in the captain's stateroom, but and they're eating with a guy who, to me, looks like an alien wearing a gorilla suit. I don't know if that's the fashion of his planet, but it looks like he put on a Earth gorilla suit and he's just not wearing the head. And that character is played by Tom Bergeron.
Oh, okay. Oh, he I guess he did have like a bit of a flair to him. So
yeah, mid period America's Funniest Home Videos fame.
Yeah, I was gonna say before you said that, and it kind of like reminded me like, okay, there was something to him, but otherwise, like I had almost completely like put that out of my memory. Like I just didn't even remember him existing.
Yeah. But, he acted from time to time.
Yeah.
And, of course, they get a line from him about a crashed ship, which he's literally he doesn't come back or anything. Like, he's literally just the guy who sets them on the course here to find this ship. And then they try to do, maybe it's script rewrites, maybe it's like the original sort of premise or the inspiration of the Tempest coming through, but it seems like they want to do like a ghost story thing.
Yeah.
Which Trek doesn't do often, but there's a couple good sort of, these are ghosts. I mean, clearly they're not because Star Trek doesn't believe in ghosts, but this kind of spooky spaceship sort of thing.
Yeah, which I feel like they didn't go all the way with that premise.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's like one, they don't commit to it, and then it flips in the end, and it kind of, it doesn't end up being about this, but what I guess what I was left with was like wanting more from why, I'm just going to call him Odo, why Odo was like doing what he did. Like, there was like, I don't know, I feel like it ended up being the more interesting thing is like getting into his psyche almost, or like what his inspiration was. And it was kind of more just like, well, you figured me out and we'll have a couple scenes like hemming and hawing about what I'm going to do about it. But like,
yeah,
I don't know. There could have been something there, I think, that is present in Forbidden Planet and the Tempest is kind of like the relationship to the daughter or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the Tempest, you've got this idea that Prospero, like any father, doesn't want his daughter to marry anybody. He doesn't want her to learn about men. When she does, she says, oh, brave new world that has such things in it. It's that father's thing of like, I don't want some guy to do to her what I did to her mother. None of that comes into either Forbidden Planet or Oasis. It's just, yeah, Odo, for some reason, doesn't want anything to happen. Then the solution to the problem turns out to be what he was doing anyway. He can just tell his weirdo holograms to build the ship right, and then suddenly everything's fine. Like, what was the problem ever?
Yeah, there was no problem. But also,
he felt guilty because he had to, bury people up on that hill like Morbius had to in Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, I felt like maybe they could have explored the guilt aspect or something. I don't know what was going, or like, maybe they at least had to like help them with something, but it seemed like they just kind of, I mean, maybe it's much like Leslie Nielsen in Forbidden Planet where it's like he's just there to like experience whatever they're going through,
Yeah, and speaking of that, like of the Enterprise episodes that I've seen, I think 50% of them involve Trip catching the eye of the sexy alien this week, and then that causes whatever the problem is. And of course, we have that again. Trip is in the Ferdinand role in this episode.
I did feel like at least, I mean, obviously it's gonna naturally be because of the time period too, but like their relationship at least felt like something more developed than like, hey, put something better on, you know?
Oh, no. Yeah, no Trek hero would ever be like that. And I did like their scenes together. I thought that they were cute, although I think Liana as a character was very underdeveloped. And it's too bad because she was played by Annie Wershing, who is an actress that I think is really good and can be really forceful. But instead they put that Kess wig on her and she's just like, oh, I like food too.
You know, that is total Kess wig where it's like, that just doesn't look like a real haircut.
Yeah. I got a question for you. So you've seen all of Enterprise. Connor Trenier, who plays Charles Trip Tucker III, probably my favorite character on Enterprise. What is he doing a thing? Every time I hear him talk, he said, this is, Enterprise came out 2 weeks after 9/11. So, of course, a decade, ruled by George W. Bush, or impressions of him. Is that what he's doing? He sounds like he's doing, she kept me from getting fried on a live plasma feed. Like he sounds like he's doing a George W. Bush thing. And the irony is that he played George W. Bush in that Tom Cruise drug pilot movie, American, whatever it was called.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I want to watch that now just to see him do...
I think, it's just one scene. You could probably catch it on YouTube. But yeah, like it's just funny because, he's like, I wish more people paid attention to me and my lady friends.
He's like,
yeah. He's like he's doing a late night show host's version of a George W. Bush impression.
I never thought about that. I did actually, while I was watching it, I did have to go like, wait, where is he from? Because this does not sound like a real accent.
He's from Washington.
Yes, he's from Washington. I was like, okay, this does, to me, it sounded like.
And I think he went to school in like Boston or something. And then Trip, of course, is famously from Florida. So I don't know where this accent is supposed to come from. But yeah,
I do think there is probably, like you mentioned, like that era, like, it's probably like, hey, I'm trying to like sound like the everyman or something.
Yeah, or maybe I'll have to watch the pilot again. But maybe once George Bush became, President Cowboy, maybe it got turned up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'd be cool to go back and see. Yeah, because I do remember there being the sentiment of like, oh yeah, George Bush, you can like have a beer with that guy. He owned a baseball team. Like,
yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah. Like
Captain Archer, we got to
does.
use more strategery. You're right. Yeah.
That really stuck out to me. I did make the George Bush connection, but dang.
Yeah, not great, but I did find it sad that I think Altair was more actualized as a character than Liana, which is if Forbidden Planet has you beat Trek, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, classic film and all, but with that element of it is just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier there was like there's this history to the galaxy that isn't as explored in Star Trek, and like everything does feel like very human centric, which I think I guess that makes sense for the premise of Enterprise, but like it really sticks out when watching Enterprise. I'm kind of like, God, like the main three dudes on the show are just like three white dudes. Like, kind of boring. I mean, there's T'Pol, and then there's like characters who I can't remember their names. We
got to talk about T'Pol. I guess we can do that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't remember their names. Like TNG, somebody came up with a brilliant idea. I'm going to assume it was Michael Piller, but it could have been anybody, where a weird, bald alien nation, Odo-looking race seeded the planets, in the local area of the Alpha Quadrant with DNA, so that's why they all have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 legs, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Okay, great. That explains it. So if we're going to fly around and find Odo, only he's got like a real bad like case of bubonic plague on his temples or whatever, that's an alien, fine. But when they go to the Delta Quadrant, or when you meet creatures from the Gamma Quadrant, why are they also bipeds, with 2 eyes? Like, how How far did these guys go seeding their DNA everywhere? Is the whole galaxy just, a bilateral symmetry club?
Yeah, I mean, at least with I mean, it happens in all the Star Treks, but I was thinking in like Voyager, they at least tried to have like the whatever species 248, whatever,
Yeah,
like,
right.
Those guys look like
they're
freaky.
literally from another universe, though.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah,
I guess the very first episode they meet like a Jello mold that's like the caretaker.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess there's some element of like I mean, we know why. It's just easier to put a dude in some makeup and there you go. But
yeah,
I don't know. Let's get some more weird looking aliens, guys.
I liked the twist of them. That was cool. I think at this point in the Trek production, like they know how technological elements can add to story beats without just saying, "Oh, they hit us with the ship don't work ray."
Yeah.
I like the fact that they're like, we checked out like this seismic stuff and this ship has been here for a lot longer than they're saying. And then they scanned the orbit and they're like, we found a escape pod that's been in orbit, that clearly launched when the ship crashed. And then they find like a body of the guy that they've already met who's a hologram. Like, that was a good twist.
Yeah. And he was all like deflated looking.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying it was a good prop, but yeah, like
I mean, it was kind of cool.
now then we kind of get back to the whole like, are they ghosts? But it's Star Trek, so you never really believe that they're ghosts.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why it was just a lost cause in the first place, but I think maybe if they stuck with it until the end and maybe ditched the the Tempest element that they included.
Yeah.
Like, if this episode wasn't influenced by the Tempest, I think maybe it could have been better.
It's hard to do supernatural stuff in Star Trek. Like, you've got this scene where everybody's, climbing through an old ship. How can you be scared when you've got a tricorder? Nothing can sneak up on you if you've got a portable radar. You know what I mean? But there is that episode of Next Generation where they meet the devil. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
They go to a planet and the devil shows up and is like, I own this planet. And they're like, you're not the devil. And they're like, are you sure? And they starts like fucking with them with technology and stuff.
Yeah.
And so since you are a fan of Star Trek and you watch the show, you don't really think it's the devil, but you do for a while wonder like, what would happen if it is? Like we're seeking strange new life and civilizations. Like what if we do meet something that for all intents and purposes like is a god or a devil or something or a spirit? Like what do we do?
Right. Well, I mean, I think about the whole, like, not the whole premise, but a big part of Deep Space Nine is like the first episode. It's like, hey, you just talk to the gods, and then it's like the whole series is like them dealing with that, and it's like,
but it's kind of looking through the telescope from the wrong end, though, because you've got a bunch of characters, background characters of the Bajorans who believe it's gods, but immediately Sisko talks to them as a Starfleet officer and goes, oh, it's aliens. It's not like he's like, oh my God, like we've met aliens, but this is something else. Like he knows that they are aliens.
Yeah, but I just feel like so many like incredible things still happen, and the fact that like there are the people who like will treat it with that weight still gives it that weight, I guess. Like, yeah, I guess it's like maybe a philosophical thing. Like maybe it is a god if people treat it like gods. You know what I mean?
If it has, if it has the omnipotence essentially and time travel or whatever, it's something that like I think DS9 is known for. I wish they had leaned into more.
Sure, yeah,
because Star Trek has always been very sort of allergic to religious and spiritual plot lines, and so we'll get there someday. Discovery is trying to do it, but I don't think they're doing a great job of it.
I feel like you could also still do something paranormal, but I mean, it could still turn out to be, or it will still turn out to be like, hey, it was some science thing. But if it's like something you couldn't explain, and maybe it's something you never come to figure out by the end too, like that could be still terrifying, you know?
If it's indistinguishable from magic, yeah.
Like that was, it's kind of like, or I just think about like when they have to think of like a new challenge they haven't faced before, or like when they introduce the Borg, it's like, here's a new challenge you haven't faced before, and you think, okay, they'll figure it out, and then they don't. It's like that's terrifying, you know?
Right.
So yeah, they could just be like, yeah, there's ghosts, and it's like, oh, we'll figure it out, and then it's like, well, we didn't figure it out, and that's kind of messed up, you know?
Now we're headed for fluidic space.
Yeah,
Voyager got weird sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, now is the time. Let's talk about T'Pol. I generally hate T'Pol. I don't like her. I know when people say they hate Keiko, I say to them, do you hate Keiko or do you hate the sloppy, too easy writing of a bunch of men about a naggy wife who all go home and their wife probably yells at them about the pile of socks on the floor. So I get that, but I hate T'Pol. Now, I'm sure somebody else could make a similar argument to me that she is not well written, but I don't hate her because she's a woman. I just hate the character. I know why she's there. I don't feel like we ever get anything great out of her. Unfortunately, I don't think the actress is that great. I think she's doing probably the best she can with what she's getting. But she is too often the butt of. I hate it when Trip and Archer gang up on her.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up, because when you were saying that,
she's the butt of too many jokes.
Yeah,
she's totally emotionless, but yet you give Tim Russ a Tuvok role, and he's great. Like, Tuvok is also a Vulcan who has pretty much mastered his emotions, and yet we still get flashes of stuff from him, but she's just there's just nothing there.
Maybe that's true. The only thing, it's probably true, because that's the only thing I can remember about her is the them just ganging up on her, which at time felt really weird. At times,
still weird.
Yeah, I would just be like, I get it's supposed to be like, hey, we're like Earth people making fun of the Vulcans, but sometimes it was like
boys club,
yeah, and so I get the Keiko element there, where it's like I just feel bad for the writing of the character more than anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, then I can't remember anything else about her other than, them just taking a shit all over her at their little private dinners they have,
Yeah, and they don't differentiate. I think I see what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to deliver, a Spock-esque character, a character who is very capable, super smart, and yet is trying self-consciously to remain aloof from the rest of the crew. But to try and do it all over again, they do not nail what they got the first time. And it's probably half writing, half performance, but they just don't nail it.
The thing about Spock was he also had sick owns too on McCoy especially, and I'm sure they wrote zingers for her, but I just don't remember.
Gets some every once in a while.
Yeah, I just feel they put her in situations, like I said, where it's she's outnumbered by dudes. I don't know. Maybe they just need to put more women in the show, obviously,
Maybe it's latent. Well, that's absolutely for sure. Maybe it's unrealized sexism on my part, but I always feel like Spock's zingers, he comes off as being sort of highfalutin, but yet you buy his self-absorption in his superiority. But when T'Pol does a similar thing, Trip and Archer are like, well, dig in. And she's like, well, I don't touch my food with my hands. She gets these lines where it seems like she's supposed to be saying that she's superior in some way, but she just comes off like a superior asshole.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Cause well, maybe
there's a nobility when Spock does it for some reason that you're kind of yeah, you tell him, Spock.
When I think of Spock too, it's I'm glad I'm not a piece of shit human like you or something, where it's her. It's just I don't get the vibe that, I don't know. It just feels I'm not gonna do this thing for an arbitrary reason, I just think of Spock in, was it last week or something, where he's I'm glad that I don't have your blood. It's
right. Yeah.
It highlights the difference of between Vulcans and humans, where this is just I'm just kind of weird, fancy, I don't know. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Plus, all it takes is just it's hard to actively maintain dignity when there's more Goombas in the room than you. So like when Archer and Trip are just like, whoa, look at Miss Prissy over here. Like there's no way to come out of that looking good.
Even with Spock, there's like the Kirk McCoy dynamic, but it feels more like split, you know?
Yeah, but he can also stand up to them too, because they're both like, look at this guy. And he's like, yeah, that's right. Look at this guy. I am the guy.
And if Spock like dunks on
he owns it
McCoy, more. Kirk's like,
oh, then nice. Kirk's like, hey, good one. Yeah.
Instead, it's like T'Pol. I think we hit on it. I think it's like
Kirk's the audience.
T'Pol like dunks on like Trip or whatever, and then like Archer's like, oh yeah, well, you know, like it's like 2 versus 1.
So we've got the answer is fragile male ego. It's male fragility is what it is. That's like they need to stick together against Queen over here with her pointed ears.
Yeah.
All right, you turned me around. I'm back on T'Pol. Team T'Pol.
Well, they'll bring her back in Picard or something, and it'll make it right.
You know what? I'd love to see that. I think that could be really cool. Well, she would be really old at that point, but it's possible.
Much like they brought Denise Crosby back to like give her a better death.
Yeah.
Like, let's bring T'Pol back somehow, and maybe in Discovery or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, Discovery is probably a little more plausible than her showing up in Picard.
Not like hundreds of years old.
Hey, if Scotty can be inside of a transporter, we can do whatever we want.
Just do the same premise, actually.
Well, where do you think you got it from? So, did we say everything we needed to say about the Tempest, the Cage, Oasis, wherever we are?
Yeah, I think that about covers it.
Why is it Oasis?
Because I think they say the word Oasis at some point, right? He's like,
I know that they're like looking through the ship and they can't find anything, and then they find like the secret panel or whatever, and they walk into the Lowe's Garden Center. So I guess that's supposed to be the Oasis, but otherwise, I don't know why it's an Oasis.
Oh yeah, they say Oasis in that part of the ship.
God.
Yeah, maybe it's like if you named an episode of that takes place like partially in 10 forward, like one scene, and you're like, this is 10 forward, the episode. I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. It's one of those. Oh, it's, you know what it is? It's the where they were like, how do we name this episode? And they probably just like I don't know, like pull out like a Shakespeare play and like flip to a page. Probably saw that word and they're like, okay, there we go.
An oasis on this desert isle. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, as much as we're dunking on it, like I said, I found it watchable, but it wasn't good.
Yeah. Well, though there's plenty of other Enterprise episodes left, I'm sure we'll have a good one in our future.
Oh yeah. I definitely remember being like pleasantly surprised at times. I don't know if that was like about 10 years ago, so who knows what I would think now.
You're a totally different person by now.
Yeah, probably.
Well, both crews in our various selections today have their own technology. So it's hard to know how to approach a technological exchange, but I think that Trek still edges out the world of Forbidden Planet.
Sure.
And I wonder if there is a Forbidden Planet universe. If you did this today, could you extend this? And we find out we continue to follow Captain Leslie Nielsen, or we get a prequel, a Dr. Morbius prequel.
Is that like something like Netflix or Amazon is like, oh, we've got it. Well, whole season of Forbidden Planet.
Never mind.
Yep. I knew that would be the response.
Yeah, not great. Although I'm watching Another Life on Netflix right now, starring Katie Sackhoff, the girl who played Starbuck in the Battlestar Galactica reboot.
Oh, okay.
It is bad, but I think it knows it's bad, so it's kind of schlocky and fun.
Okay, so it's like living it up in the schlockiness.
I think so, but if I find, don't tell me if they don't know. You know what I mean? Like I'm still enjoying it.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want the curtain to be raised on that.
Yeah, I want to stay ignorant of their ignorance. But anyway, we should talk about a technological exchange.
Yeah.
In this case, I'll remind our audience that our list of Star Trek technology goes 1 to 10. It's phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drive, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, And, of course, androids. Now, is Robbie the robot an android, or is he a robot? I guess it's in his name.
Seems like I feel like he's a robot. What makes an android?
Well, an android is, I mean, that's a good question. An android is a robot that's designed to be like or to look like a human. I mean, Robbie's human-shaped, certainly.
Human-shaped? He doesn't have, well, he has a face.
If you prick him, does he bleed? Is that what you're saying?
Can he get drunk? He can't get drunk, I think.
No, he definitely can't get drunk. We know that for sure, yeah.
We can at least, for the fun of it, include him in the android pool.
Okay, I can see that. So we're going to roll our 10-sided die. And we got 4, which is transporters. How would transporters have changed the action of Forbidden Planet?
They didn't have those, did they?
Well, they had to land the ship.
Yeah.
Specifically on Altair IV.
Well, I guess the id monster would have had a harder time.
Could the id monster fly?
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Or could it, beam up? Yeah, because part of the movie is that it is sneaking into the ship at night and, sabotaging the ship.
That actually could have made the concept of the id monster, more terrifying if it was because now it's if it's in the sky in space, it's almost this. It makes me think of Justice from TNG, or there's something messing with our ship and we can't see it. It's now it is a godlike figure.
I'll see your justice and raise you. I can't remember the name of the episode where they go to the planet where Kevin Uxbridge, the Dode, is living with his wife, Rashawn. And they live in this one little area, and they tell them that these aliens came and destroyed the entire planet but left them fine, But every time they ask too many questions, the Hushnak ship shows up to to sort of to fuck with them. And then they find out later that Kevin is this all-powerful being, who killed all Hushnak everywhere. And he feels really bad about it, but it's sort of these unconscious things kind of happen to the crew as they sort of pick at this problem. And they live by themselves in this idyllic area on this desert planet.
Gosh.
It's very Tempesty.
We're still, I think there's still
it's Tempest all the way down.
Yeah, that's, I guess, like I said, it's the Star Trek. It's the bones of Star Trek almost.
Not that bones, though.
No. Not the bones.
So they definitely could. I don't know. Maybe they could try to, even if they landed on the ship, they could lock their transporters on the id monster and beam it into space, maybe, or I don't know.
The id monster's physical nature is very strange,
Apparently, if you look closely, when you see the outline of it, it has a goatee, which is supposed to be a hint that it is connected to Dr. Morbius.
Oh. Okay. I thought the goatee on Morbius was yep, here's the bad guy.
Here's the bad guy. I also really liked when they made there's a great special effect where the invisible creature's walking and it's making, impressions in the sand.
So
and then
good.
later on they cast one of those impressions and it's this giant bird claw, this prop, which I just thought was really neat.
Yeah, that's that there's that terrifying unknown. That's so good to see that. As opposed to ever really seeing the monster.
Yeah, and which is weird too, because when you think about it, it isn't, local flora or fauna. We don't know if there is any local flora or fauna because they bring the tigers and the deers or whatever with them. But they think what could this thing be? And it's not anything. It's literally whatever scares Dr. Morbius, I guess, because he has conjured this creature from his own imagination.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I was about to say, it makes me think of where no one has gone before, where stuff just happens because they think about it.
Which is also, well, I won't give that one away because we might do that on the show someday. But, yeah, you know what? This is a lot more fun than talking about technological exchange. I guess we'll move on real quick to Enterprise. What if they didn't have transporters? And the answer is they don't really for the first season. They don't use them very much.
They invent that later.
Yeah. What if they did have transporters?
I mean, it would make their whole infiltration way simpler. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if it would just be another. It would just be, hey, we're doing Star Trek still. I don't think it would have changed much.
As somebody who's seen a lot of Enterprise episodes, do you feel like not just the setting, but specifically the removing of familiar elements, or at least limiting of them, increased the drama in a positive way?
Maybe it just doesn't feel like it takes advantage of that. And when I was thinking like, okay, what if they did have transporters? It would be like, I just imagine like, well, if the writers want to, they will just figure out how to like take them out if they, you know, if they need to have them not be able to transport, you know, like they always find a way. It's kind of like, I think there was some comedian who had a joke about like in horror movies now, everyone has to like lose their cell phone.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there probably is too, like episodes where like they play into it well, but I didn't really feel it in this episode. Like when you said there weren't transporters, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, you know?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about like the pilot, like there are some specific scenes and elements that exist really only because they must move from one place to the next. Like in a typical TNG episode, you'd beam down to one room, the scientist would meet you, you'd walk to the next room, and that would be the set for the entire episode, you know, except for the Enterprise. But like in Broken Bow, they have to go to this one planet, then as they're escaping the planet, they can't beam to the ship, so they have to like do this like running gun battle like through an area, and then they all have to like run and jump on the shuttle real fast and it flies away. And you wouldn't have any of that if they had transporters. And I think that it serves, for something like that, it serves what they're trying to do, because they're trying to give you a more sort of rustic kind of action-oriented Trek in Enterprise. But
sure,
sounds like from you, that doesn't continue as the show goes on.
And not to my knowledge, like it makes sense that it would be in their mind too in like the first episode, because it's like that's the whole premise of where it's set. But like when stuff I remember, I'm sure that comes up actually, but stuff I remember is instead doing the whole like, okay, like we need to like come up with a system like where if we're like in trouble, like I could say like, I don't know, red alert. And this, you know, it's like,
well, we get that in this episode, because it's like, what if she gets hurt? What are you going to do? Make a holographic doctor?
Yeah. Or like there's one where like, he's like, I don't know if I should like interfere with this planet's growth. Like maybe it's one day there will be like a directive, you know, like he literally says the word directive.
A directive above all others, a first directive, if you will. Yeah.
And that stuff I remember way more than it ever being like, oh crap, they don't have this technology yet. They don't have a holodeck or something, you know?
Yeah.
I think eventually I think there is an episode where it's like, it's about them inventing a transporter or something, and it is kind of like scary, because it's like, will this work? You know, I could be wrong though. I don't remember.
Isn't that the one where the guy, like Project Daedalus or whatever, like where the guy's son is trapped in another universe because of like a transporter accident?
I don't know. I don't remember now.
Okay, you're no Enterprise expert.
No, I'm not. I've seen it once. I've now seen this episode twice, so.
Okay, well, you got that going for you. All right, well, I think that about wraps it up for this week's BackTrekking. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you like the show, tell a friend. Really, it's the best way to get the word out about the show. And while you're at it, tell them to follow us at BackTrekking on Twitter. And as always, we're always looking for suggestions for what we should talk about. This is not a great episode of Enterprise, but if you've got a better one, let us know at BackTrekking, 2Ks, on Twitter, and we'll see if we talk about it. Gooey, tell people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter at GUIFame. Go check out that Super Mario Brothers virtual theater episode we were talking about.
Absolutely.
At Virtual Theater X for that. Yeah, it's a fun one for sure.
All right. And I'm at Caliban. That's K-A-1-I-B-A-N with a K and not a C, like the monster in the Tempest. You can also find the Just Enough Trope Network at Just Enough Trope, all one word, on Twitter. And I think that's it for us. We will see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.